welcome back to the LaunchPoint Leader Podcast. My name's Lori.
This is Beau.
We're excited to be back with another week to share a story that someone has written in that has listened to this podcast, just sharing where they're at with their leadership journey, what struggles they're facing, and just looking for some different ideas, advice that they can take into their journeys. If you listening have anything you'd like to listen to or for us to read about, just write us in to advice@launchpointleader.com. Today, our letter says, Dear LaunchPoint, thanks for taking some time for my question. I found your podcast last week and thought your insights were really useful. What's gotten me to write is that I'm struggling with balancing kindness and performance when dealing with team members. I have a team member who is exceptionally kind and I know is trying really hard, but they're struggling to meet the performance expectations of their role after even extensive training and support. I can tell this person is trying and our team really enjoys working with them every day. They're very kind and always willing to lend a helping hand to everyone. However, despite their best efforts and multiple members of the team spending additional time with this person to train them, it has become clear it's just not a good fit. On the one hand, I'm deeply appreciative of this team member's positive attitude and genuine desire to contribute. On the other hand, it's becoming hard to ignore the impact their performance deficiencies have on the team's overall productivity. It's to the point where when left alone for too long, projects start to fall behind and someone has to step in, which puts them in a more difficult position. They've been on our team for 8 months now, and they're being outpaced by those who joined only 2 to 3 months previously. This role is entry-level, so the project load and our onboarding is usually completed in around 60 days. Finding the right approach to address this issue has been something I know I've needed to do for a while, but have been putting off. Now, I can't ignore it any longer because I have members of my team coming to me with their concerns. How do I provide constructive feedback without demoralizing this individual? How do I reconcile their kindness with the need for performance improvement? Thanks again for reading. I hope this makes it on the podcast and I can hear your thoughts on this. All the best. Delaying the demotion.
Well, hope has been granted. You are on the podcast.
Congratulations.
You did it. Hits home. Hits home. We deal with this sometimes with all the folks that are working with us.
Absolutely.
I just can't help but say, like, the first thing that I would say when we think about solving this problem is the idea of future proofing. So, like, what do we learn from this? And I think one of the things that was said towards the end of the note, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is I've ignored it long enough.
Yeah.
And I would just challenge this leader to say, don't ignore it from the beginning. From the beginning, there has to be performance metrics that have to be met.
Yeah.
There has to be additional training given, which it sounds like it's happened, but you can't overlook it.
Yeah.
So that would be just the first thing that's kind of stood out to me. I think you're right. Kindness doesn't equal competency. And that makes it really hard because when somebody's really kind and they're a genuinely good person, but they're not competent in their role, man, it makes the job of a leader a bit harder. But kindness doesn't equal competency. I think if you've given additional training and it's clear that they're falling behind and not doing the role that they're being paid to do, then for me, it feels like there must be an honest evaluation given to that team member if one's not been given already, where we say, okay, here is your output, here is the expected output, here are the behaviors you're engaging in, here are the expected behaviors, these are the gaps. And this is a timeline that I'm going to give you to close those gaps, not looking for perfection, but progress. And then give them a timeline and key metrics that they have to hit. Give them additional resources. So if there are additional training manuals, additional opportunities for them to take, give them those. And I guess I would just say, if you can lay your head down at night and go, I actually believe I've done everything I can from the training and assistance standpoint for this person, then I wouldn't give them any more of that. But if you don't feel like you have, go back and give them a little bit more, because you're already 8 months in. Is that correct? 8 months?
Yes. 8 months. Yep.
We're already 8 months in here. So, I mean, the investment's already been made. The best case scenario is that you turn this thing around. Worst case scenario is you lose this person. Well, worst case scenario is they stay and nothing changes,
That's
right?
true.
But next worst is that you lose them and the amount of money and time that you've already put into it. So I would just ask those questions and see if there is anything else that you can do. And I think if it's just not working out over the measurement period and you've been really clear with the results that they must achieve and the progress that they must make, the worst thing you can do, and this hits home for me too, the worst thing you can do as a leader is to continue to have them in that position and in that role. You're actually not showing kindness back to them. You're just trying to take the easy way out.
Yeah.
And the best thing that we can do at that point is to help them end their time with us as honorably as humanly possible, and help them find something else outside of your company, or if it's a big enough company inside, it help them find typically something outside of the company
that would be better suited.
That matches what they want. Yeah, because if they're not winning, I mean, it's not really right to keep them there. So,
right.
I will say though, the last thing is sometimes it takes time, but boy, it starts to work. It starts to click. Not all the time.
Right.
I can think of more instances where that's not happened,
right,
in my experience, but there's a few that pop into my head that I'm like, boy, I thought we were on the way to being done.
Right.
And it turned out they were a multi-year team member for us. It ended up when they left, we were like, no. So that's kind of some thoughts there to start with. I don't know if that's very helpful or not, but
yeah, I think it is. Starting back at the beginning of what you said, the concept of don't ignore it from the beginning. That's something, unfortunately, in this situation, I think it takes this sometimes to realize the signs you were ignoring subconsciously, maybe just putting to the side. And I have a tendency to do this as well, of just really small things like, oh, well, that's small. It's not affecting anybody else right now. I can fix it, or I can cover it. Or this one team member, maybe you as the leader don't see it for a while because you mentioned in your letter, other members are helping intercept them. Maybe it's small in the beginning, but when you start noticing those little things, making it a point to have conversations early and often is something I hear you say a lot.
Yeah. And
I think something I've learned along my journey too is when having those conversations, using very specific language we talk about in goals all the time. We want them to be measurable and SMART goals and all these things, but you've got to think the same way when you're giving feedback to people, because you can't just say, I need you to improve on this, learn this better.
Yes.
Take this report and do it better. It's language like that in your mind, that means you need to carry this on your own. To that team member who, we're not sure of their level of awareness, it can be hard to gauge sometimes. They don't know what that means. They just say, oh, I am doing better. I could do it in 2 hours, and it used to take me 2.5. Yep. It's supposed to take an hour to get this task done. So being very specific in language from the beginning. And we've done other episodes where we talk about performance conversations, things like that. That's where having those often, before it's a disciplinary, before it's we're putting you on a notice of what needs to change, before it gets to that level, you can start handling it and seeing if they rise to the occasion.
Beautiful point.
Yeah.
And I think the way to summarize that is that there can be zero wiggle room in the mind of the person that you're giving this feedback to on exactly what they need to go and do starting right now.
Yeah.
It's got to be incredibly specific, like you said, point by point, action by action, not just, I need you to get better at X. So,
and this really makes me think of a time in my leadership journey. It's been years, but I ended up having to end a journey with somebody that was working in our business. And I went into the conversation feeling solid about, they must know this is coming, this is going to happen. And it just became very apparent quickly that they were blindsided in the moment. They had truly no idea that it was to the point where we had to end it. And it was a different situation. They weren't necessarily the kindest team member. There were some other character issues involved. And so it just made it a little different. But knowing that they still left that meeting surprised by the conversation. And I just remember feeling like I never want someone to walk away feeling that again.
Yeah.
And so it just really changed the outlook on how I approach those. But then thinking through, if I do have any inkling that maybe there's going to be issues with someone where they might not be performing, I just want to give them every opportunity to win and prove that they can, because you're right. It's so nice to think of the people that needed some extra time, but ended up being great team members, maybe not forever, but for the time that they were here. And it's truly when they left, their absence was felt.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, valuing results in relationships is a hard balance to strike sometimes, but I think that's starting from the beginning. What do you learn from this? Don't beat yourself up, but what do you learn? You learn that you've got to have structured feedback and metrics that have to be hit for every team member all the time, period.
Yeah.
And that has to do with performance, and it has to do with attitude. It sounds like the attitude is a check, performance is a not.
Right.
And yeah, if you put this in place now going forward, it just makes things a lot clearer for everybody involved. And even the really nice folks and kind folks can't deny what data shows.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that just protects you, and it's protecting your team. You know, you mentioned in here as well, like your other team members are starting to suffer in their workload because of this a little bit, probably to different levels, but that'll just build over time. And what's causing resentment amongst the team to where this person was a really valued, nice member of the team, maybe just failing now. They're still nice, but there's some resentment building up in that wrong side of tension.
No doubt.
The team. So dealing with this now is not only just being kind to this person in the long term, like we said, but it's the best thing, the kindest thing to do for your team, necessary.
People will perform to the least level that's accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, if you're not careful, everybody else will start looking at this nice, kind person and going, boy, they're a terrible worker, actually. So if they can get away with that,
why do I have to do this?
Throttle back a bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, it's going to hurt you long term not to deal with it up front in the moment. But if you deal with it the way that we suggested, and then you change things going forward, I don't think it's an impersonal way to deal with it. I think it's a very personal, very relationship driven way to deal with it, and giving that person every opportunity to correct what can be corrected if they choose to do so, or if they have the ability to do so.
Right.
If they don't, they shouldn't be in that job in the first place. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really solid, just pieces of tactical advice, some of the experiences we've had in the past, how we've dealt with it. So delaying the demotion, I hope, you've been able to take some things away from this today. And if anybody else listening has a similar situation they want to share with us, or something entirely different that they're dealing with as a leader, a business owner, we would love to hear from you from advice@launchpointleader.com. Thanks for listening in, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much.